I'm standing on top of a Roman temple and you can't see it. Welcome to History on Your Doorstep, the series which introduces you to the extraordinary past hidden in the most ordinary of places. For this first series, we'll be focusing on the ancient history of St Albans, or as it was better known at the time, Verulamium, the third largest Roman settlement in Britain. We know that Boudica burnt down Verulamium during her revolt in 60 AD, but what did this town actually look like? Well, you're looking at it. I'm in Verulamium Park, which is named after the town which occupied this site 2,000 years ago. Pieces of the town can still be seen today. The city walls, the Roman theatre, and the hypercourse are a Roman system of underfloor heating. But all of these structures came centuries after Boudica. The main excavations of Verulamium took place in the 1930s, and they were directed by husband and wife duo Mortimer and Tessa Wheeler. Then in the 50s and 60s, it was excavated by Shepherd Frere. As far as we can tell from these excavations, it seems Verulamium had it pretty easy following the Roman invasion in 43 AD. The Catavilani tribe, which occupied this area, seems to have been favoured by the Roman forces. There are no clear signs of military occupation, and development started quickly. This is completely different from Colchester, where Tacitus tells us legionary forces were established immediately. We can see a layer of black ash in the archaeology, dating to around the time of Boudica's rebellion, indicating the level of destruction. But this wasn't the end for Verulamium. Evidence suggests that about a decade later, they begin to rebuild. In the 2nd century, there's a new emperor, and his name is Hadrian. Yes, the one the wall is named after. His rule brings about huge expansion throughout the empire, and Verulamium is no exception. The city's walls are upgraded to enclose 200 acres of land, 10 times the size it was pre-Boudica. This is when huge mansions like the one which held the hypercourse pop up. The theatre, the only example to have a stage, is also constructed this century. Unfortunately, Verulamium seems susceptible to fire. The town is rebuilt twice following fires in the next 100 years, replacing the timber structures with stone. Verulamium has been a Scheduled Ancient Monument since 1923, meaning it is highly protected. Not just anyone can come dig here without a very good reason. And this is where Dr. Kris Lockyear comes in. A senior lecturer in archaeology at UCL, Kris Lockyear has had a grant since 2013 to do geophysics scans of the park and surrounding area, producing great images like these ones. This is one of the least invasive ways to get a proper look at what is under the ground. I caught up with Kris during his most recent outing near the Welland Roman bathhouses, where he explains some of the techniques used.
This morning we've been doing an earth resistance survey. This is a way of trying to map what's underneath the surface by using the resistance to an electrical current passing through the soil. Where we've got a wall or something like that, we get high resistance. Where we've got a ditch or a pit, we'll get low resistance. So what we've done is lay out grid squares, 20 by 20 metre grid squares, and with the earth resistance meter go up and down strings, taking readings every 50 centimetres, which I'll then plot on the computer, and if we're lucky we'll be able to see the buildings underneath this field. The other survey technique we've been doing this morning is something called magnetic susceptibility survey, and that's just a way of looking at the broad scale background changes in the magnetic properties of the soil. So for that technique we're only taking one reading every 5 metres or so, and it's to give us a sort of broader pan against which the more detailed survey techniques can be compared.
But even with these amazing images, the scale of these buildings can be hard to grasp. Visualizing an entire city is no easy task. But St Albans Museums are hosting their annual Painting Up the Park event, which just might help us with that problem. For the last few years, the museum has held an event where they choose a structure from the Roman town and paint it on the grass, a bit like a football pitch. This year, they selected something quite unique to Verulamium. So where are we standing right now?
Well, right now we're inside one of the Roman temples at Verulamium, and this is the curiously shaped one, which is known as the triangular temple.
So what you've got, probably seen in the distance as people out there, they're walking towards what is London Gate. And London Gate out there was the gate that led to London, of course, and you had Watling Street coming straight through there.
And it cuts across what would be the grid system. So it's breaking down almost square or rectangular grids into triangular or sub-triangular pieces. We've got an altar at this end, which is the broader end with a couple of side rooms which have tanks in. And then we've got a colonnade out here that would allow people to process around part of the building at least.
Do we have an understanding of what people would have been doing in this temple at the time?
Yes, yeah. This one was excavated in the 1930s, and it was excavated not completely, but to a larger extent than any of the other temple sites. And there were a number of deposits around. So there were, I think, 15 different sacrificial deposits that were found inside. Pretty much all of them had burnt, cremated oak. And there was a lot of pine cone needles that were being burnt within the area as well. What we seem to be getting with the burnt pine cones is so lots of burning of small bits and pieces, libations and such like, and also some bigger deposits being buried on the side. But the pine cones are kind of significant because pine cones are used in the religious ceremony of a goddess called Cybele or Cybele and her consort Attis. Pine cones are not common to this area, so they would have either having to bring in the seeds or bring in trees to sort of grow and nurture in this area.
The reason why pine cones are significant in rituals to do with Cybele and Attis is slightly uncertain. In Ovid's Metamorphoses, he tells us that Attis turns into a pine tree upon his death, maybe after castrating himself, and that's why the trees make the goddess happy, which seems normal enough for a Roman myth.
It looks like we've got a temple to this goddess, who is a goddess of cities, is one of her roles. And given that as you approach from London, you see this site, that's probably a quite good link. So you arrive at Verulamium and you have the goddess of cities, and I'm sure they localize her a bit, so she's probably the goddess of the city of Verulamium as well as an aspect of that. And you've got the religious aspects going on outside and inside, so there's some stuff which is being held which is publicly available, and there's some stuff inside which is a little bit more private for the initiates or whatever, I suppose.
Do we know what kind of would have surrounded the temple, like the context of it?
Verulamium, we do know quite well how the town changes, and in the sort of 2nd century it really expands outwards. It's on a slightly odd plot of land because we have Watling Street entering the town, and there's this one little bit of land right on the edge which became the triangular temple, which wasn't much use for anything else. So again, partially pragmatic, I think, as to why the temple's here.
And we know this quite well. This isn't sort of a guesstimate. This was excavated in the 30s during the Wheelers excavations. And so all the material from that excavation is in the museum, and we know a lot about this building. We know a lot about sort of the cults that were being worshipped here, and even down to, the colour of the plaster on the outside and things like that. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, there's very little guesswork going on the shape here.
But we would have Watling Street running along this side, and then we actually have the road grid road running along the other side. So you've got traffic coming into and out of the town and traffic moving around the town. And then in this direction, we're moving into the area which is really a bit of a suburb. So we're in a zone where in the late 2nd century and beyond, we have large townhouses, large luxury houses built on a similar scale to a villa. There are 5 or 6 rooms on the ground floor with mosaics, 10 or 12 rooms on the ground floor and another floor up above, set in small grounds and gardens. So it's the genteel, well-to-do part of St Albans here. And then the road takes you into the heart of the town, where the shops and the markets and the bathhouse and the inns and taverns are. But it is on the main drag on this side here. So we are seeing everything that's passing through the town is coming along here. So it would have been a very lively zone. And when it was excavated, there's a whole series of posts along the front, and they're clearly doing what we still do, and we've done it in fact out the front of the museum, is that you've put some bollards out so that the vehicles and wagons that are coming by aren't going to bang into the wall of the building. They're going to hit those posts instead. So they're clearly looking to sort of make sure the temple doesn't get too bashed about because it's on the main road.
So, the big question is, once the Wheelers removed all the lovely artefacts, which you can now see inside Verulamium Museum, why didn't they leave the remaining temple walls uncovered? The short answer is the temple walls are simply better protected under the ground. It's boring, I know, but if you speak to any archaeologist, they will tell you that archaeology, even when done right, is destruction. It completely separates finds from their original context and leaves structures vulnerable to moisture damage. The constant process of wetting and drying, freezing and thawing in the unpredictable UK weather causes walls to degrade, crack and crumble. Unfortunately, Roman clay is particularly vulnerable and can be completely destroyed by the process, so we might be left with no temple at all, which, you don't want. So, for now, we'll just have to settle for imagining it. It seems that Verulamium declines by the end of the 3rd century, construction slows and buildings fall into disrepair. By the end of the 4th and early 5th century, many houses are abandoned or maybe demolished. In 410 AD, the Romans leave Britain, and there's evidence that Verulamium remains occupied, but on a much smaller scale, returning to timber structures. So there you have it, an invisible history of a Roman town right under your feet. Although it would be great to dig up the triangular temple again and live our 1930s archaeologist fantasies, this isn't possible unless you fancy the police coming to pay you a visit. But that doesn't mean that archaeology isn't happening in St Albans anymore. Next episode, I'll be meeting up with Tom again at a new dig just round the corner from Verulamium Park to try to understand what archaeology looks like today.